Welcome to Philosophy and Critical Thinking. In today's video, I'll be going over a thought experiment from a YouTuber named Vaush called Vaush's Driving Analogy, a thought experiment on the paradox of tolerance. The paradox of tolerance is an idea that came from philosopher Karl Popper. The paradox of tolerance is, roughly, if a society tolerates everyone, including the intolerant, then the intolerant will impose their intolerance on society. Therefore, the society will become more intolerant. So, we should be intolerant of the intolerant. Vaush applies this principle to freedom of speech. There are some philosophers and some people that hold an unconstrained view on freedom of speech. There should be no limits and no constraints towards somebody's speech. These people are sometimes called freedom of speech absolutists. He addresses this in the form of a thought experiment, which I'll play for you now.
Now, imagine you have a society that loves driving. Loves driving. This is what this society prioritizes. Our First Amendment, freedom of speech. Their First Amendment, being able to drive. Vroom, vroom, baby. That's what they care about, okay? Now, in our current society, right now, today, in America, I don't know what the fuck you people are doing over there in Europe, Eurasia, Africa, South America, but over here in North America, the only America, we drive on roads. And sometimes, in some parts of the country, you can drive wherever you want. If you're in the middle of Nevada, for example, you can just kind of drive off a road. Actually, like 80% of Nevada is federal property. Be careful about that. You're gonna get shot. But there are parts of the world where you can just drive around because you don't need no roads. However, not all of us live in these wacky rural areas where you can drive wherever the fuck you want. Many of us live in cities, and in cities, the places where you can drive a car are actually fairly limited. But here's the kicker. The fact that there are limitations to where we are able to drive is what allows us to drive at all. If we could drive cars anywhere, onto sidewalks, into bank lobbies, if we could drive cars the wrong way on the wrong side of the street, if we could drive them up the down ramp in parking garages, if we could drive them anywhere we wanted to, if we wanted to pick little Timmy up from school and we could just slowly drive into the cafeteria, you know, the bones of children and glass crunching underneath our wheels as we try to pick out our kid amongst the dozens that are screaming and crying and running for cover. Would this be a society which has a healthy relationship with driving? Even if we ignore all of the jokey running over kids sort of stuff, we recognize that by implementing rules which dictate our ability to drive, we actually make society more capable of facilitating as much vehicular transport as possible. I know this is a stupid and wacky analogy, but if you really think about it for a second, it does make sense. We can only drive because there are rules for driving, and likewise with speech. What exactly happens to a, let's say, internet forum when there are no rules for discourse whatsoever and you can do or say anything you want? Anything you want. There are no moderation policies, no TOS. Well, invariably what will happen is the same thing that has happened in many such forums online, which is that everyone who isn't a white man gets bullied off. Because as it turns out, if a black dude is just looking to spend his day doing something cool and fun, he probably doesn't want to have to contend every single fucking time he goes online with a gaggle of dipshits making jokes about his race. And same likewise for women. And I'm just talking about jokes. I can tell you as somebody who's active in the political sphere that things extend beyond jokes pretty frequently, and very often the threats of violence go in one direction against one group of people against a certain other type of people. And what this means, essentially, is that there's a chilling effect being placed in the free speech of people who don't have the social power to defend themselves initially. There are no parts of the internet, or at the least very few parts of the internet, where men and where white people fear to go online because they will be ruthlessly mocked for their race or gender. not super common. I'm sure there are some places, as we saw with Glinner, Mumsnet. Maybe if you go there and you're a man, you get made fun of, I guess. Or maybe there are some parts of Twitter where white people get made fun of, I guess. You know, but for the most part, the idea of being like unilaterally condemned and like harassed for your race or gender, this isn't really something that happens to white people or to men or to cisgender people or to straight people, however far you want to take that. Which means they have impunity to shape the internet however the fuck they want to. They can go into essentially any part of the internet and they can bend it to fit their comfort because there's no threat against them, socially or materially. And that's just not the case for everyone. Freedom of speech is contingent on the ability for every single person in this country and every single person online to be able to express their opinions without fear of harassment, threats, bullying, doxing, whatever. And in that sense, the people who threaten, the people who bully, the people who harass, and the people who dox are meaningfully damaging the ability for those people to express themselves freely.
So now that you've heard the thought experiment and the analogy that he applies to the thought experiment, is the analogy a good one, or are there relevant differences? The second question we can ask is Popper right about the paradox of tolerance? Do you agree with the paradox of tolerance, or do you reject that in its entirety? And also the third question, does the paradox of tolerance apply to speech? Sometimes some people will say, okay, the paradox of tolerance might apply to actions and certain other kinds of behaviors, but it doesn't apply in the area of speech. If you want more information, you can go onto the website philosophycriticalthinking.com. In there, I've got a tutorial on arguments from analogy and thought experiments, which can be helpful in analyzing whether you think the argument and analogy from Vaush is a good one or a not so good one. Also, I have my book available on Amazon called Contrasting Identities, Navigating Identity Politics Conversations. Thank you.